Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Afternoon.
Good to see you guys. Thank you very, very much for taking time out of your very busy schedules, especially this year end, to spend a few minutes with me today. Typically what we do is start off with just a quick intro for those that are watching, to kind of know who we are and just kind of give a little brief overview of our history in the tech space. So I'll kind of go first, so everyone knows who I am. So welcome everyone. Thanks for joining in today. We're really glad you took some time to meet with us today and chat with us. My name is Maryann Pagano. I am Chief Executive Officer of BlackHawk Data. We are a solutions provider in the New York, New Jersey area. I've been in the IT space for a long time, and I've been a VAR my whole life, and I love the space, and I would not trade it for the world. So thanks for being here. Helen?
My name is Helen Lamproulos, and I'm from Cisco Systems. I'm a services account manager and just closed my 24th anniversary at Cisco on November 30th. Thank you for asking me to join today. I'm excited.
Kelli?
Yeah, hi there. Thanks so much, Maryann. Kelli Moraz, and I am a senior partner territory business manager here at VMware. And I've been at VMware a little over 4 years, but been in the tech space 20 years plus. So spent a lot of time here. Really excited to talk with you guys.
And Amanda?
Thanks, Maryann. First and foremost, thank you so much for joining us. I'm looking forward to this conversation. I'm Amanda Adams. For those of you who I do not know, I'm currently at CrowdStrike. I've been here for almost 6 years and lead our America's Alliances Partner Organization.
So thank you all for that. And again, thank you very much for joining. Thanks for those that are tuning in today. So the first thing I always like to start with, because a lot of people who are watching may not be in the tech space now. They may be in school. They may be doing other things. They may have an interest in the technology space. I always talk about what sparked your interest in tech. And what I usually tell people is tech usually finds you. You don't always find tech, right? It was, at least in my case. I remember back in, well, I won't say the year, but way back when I was looking for a job. I was out of school, and my grandmother comes to me with the newspaper, and yes, there was a newspaper back then, and said, hey, you got to go check out this job. It's a receptionist job. So I went and I interviewed. It was close to my house, and it was a job in the tech space. I had never really understood the tech space back then. I didn't really know what it was about. It was working for a small Cabletron reseller, because I just aged myself, back in the day. I didn't have any skills or anything at that point, right? So I was a receptionist for a while. And I kind of worked my way up. I kind of learned the space. It was very interesting, right? Using all the different programs, which I'm now not going to name because I don't know how old I am. Just doing different things, doing some marketing, all the marketing literature you had back then, doing proposals for customers, just kind of getting a little bit of piece of the industry, right? Getting to understand different areas of the space. I went to work for a larger reseller. I've been in the reseller my whole life. It's kind of all I've done. I've never been in manufacturer. I've never been in distribution. I've always been in this space. So I went to work for much larger VARs as time went on. And it was great because I got to work with a lot of owners, a lot of executives. So I got to see how different things in the technology worked. Everything from finance and accounting to marketing to sales, just the administrative back office, and how everything functioned together and how it all kind of seamlessly kind of worked together. The space I found myself more comfortable in was sales. I tend to be exceptionally chatty, so I have like the sales and marketing space. And I've been doing that my whole life. I've been an inside sales rep pretty much my whole career. So I am inside sales turned chief executive officer in the last 4.5 years. Yeah,
that's awesome. It's impressive.
It's quite a difference. You don't, it's not something you think about doing as a female. It's not something that you think you can do as a female. It just kind of happened, right? Is all I can kind of say. Let's start with you. So Kelli, let's start with you.
Yeah. So it's funny. I went to University of Virginia. I grew up in Northern Virginia, and I was in the business school there. So I did major in finance and marketing. And my first job out of college was with KPMG Consulting, and spent a little time doing mortgage finance. And then it was funny because Cisco actually invested like $1 billion in KPMG. This was back, if I date myself, like 1999. And so it was funny. We had to do all this training on Cisco, and I remember taking it, and I was like, "Gosh, that'd be a great company." And Herndon, Virginia, they have an office, and I saw like a marketing job, and ended up applying. I had to fly in like on a red-eye flight, and it was funny talking about chatty. They were like, I had like 5 back-to-back interviews, and they were like, if you're this energetic after like a red-eye interviewing. So I got the job, but it was my first taste like into IT, and it was in marketing. And then I had an older sister. She really came from the IT space at a federal reseller partner. And so then after some time at Cisco, I ended up going to work at that bar. A lot of federal people, GTSI, a lot of people came from that bar. And it was great. I mean, I learned so much there. To your point, Maryann, you see like all facets of the company. And I did a lot of different marketing opportunities there. And then moved to Brocade. So a couple different chapters in my career, but spent a lot of time at Brocade Communications and then at VMware. So it's been a journey, but I had some different experiences working marketing, sales, partnerships, whether it's OEM, distribution, channel partners, what I'm doing now. So it's been great. But it kind of I had some experience, but to your point, it kind of finds your path and kind of who you know and things like that. So
yeah, it does. You don't kind of set out to be IT. It just kind of finds you in some form or another.
Yes, exactly.
Amanda, how about you?
Yeah, so if you would have asked me when I was growing up if I wanted to end up in the position that I am today, I would have probably laughed in general, just because I grew up. I played sports, and I actually played volleyball all through college, and I thought for sure I would either stick within the athletic realm and coach a volleyball team or work for a professional sports team. So I was actually interviewing for the Golden State Warriors right when I was finishing my MBA. So I was going through a process of interviewing there, but I also was interviewing with Cisco. I was living in San Jose at the time, and when I was going through the interview process with Golden State, it was for sales and their ticket office, but they were paying not as much as Cisco, and then 2, the commute would not be as great, right? And so the interviewers that I met with, and they were super direct with me. They basically walked through and said, listen, you're not getting paid as much, and then 2, your commute is going to really stink. Like, you really need to think through your options at the moment in time. And the Cisco opportunity really came through a connection that I had growing up. And I always laugh at saying it's not what you know, it's who you know. Your success once you're in the role is really about what you know, but getting a foot into the door is all about your network and connections. And that has led me to a lot of jobs in my life. But I ended up going the Cisco route, and I moved from the San Jose office after a little while to the One Penn office in New York. Worked there, moved to a resale partner that was local to get into sales. And then my old boss at Cisco hired me back at Tenable, where I got my first step into channel management. So I was there for quite some time, and then have been at CrowdStrike for the last 6 years. So yes, a very unconventional path in technology. It did find me. It would have been a completely different world if I would have ended up in a front office or back office somewhere in a professional sports team. Probably more fun, but technology is pretty fun too.
It has its fun moments.
That's right, yeah.
It's what you make of it. You have to find fun in technology sometimes. Fun is not always just right there in front of you.
Yeah.
Yes, I've had a lot of fun in my career. Helen, how about you?
So I think I beat you because I worked out of college for the state. I worked in HR, and high tech found me from the wedding. One of my best friends' cousins, she worked for all these startup companies, and she wanted me to interview for the startup company. And I was like, I have no idea what it's about. You know, I'm happy where I am. I work for the government, blah, blah, blah. And so she said, just give it a shot or whatever. And I interviewed. And I remember it was like the CFO. It was a startup company called Point Communications. And I met with the CFO, the CEO, the director, VP of marketing, VP of HR, and the VP of sales. And I was offered, a job like within 1 week or whatever. And I remember them telling me, like, I didn't get the job because I'm like the smartest person in the smartest in the shed. I got it because of my passion and my drive. Like, I'm 54 years old, and I would say, people are like, where's your passion come from, your drive? I was born with it basically. And I remember when they gave me the offer letter, I remember calling them up and saying, I work full time waitressing. I'm working full time in the office. I'm going to quit both my jobs. Can you just maybe take away the stock? Because I had no idea what stock meant. I said, and just raise my salary because I need to get by, going from two jobs to one. And the VP of sales, I remember at the time he said, I'm going to increase your salary, but I'm not going to take your stock away from you, and you'll thank me down the road. And lo and behold, 2 years later, we went public, and then Cisco acquired us. And I've been at Cisco. I started off as a sales coordinator. I had no experience in high tech or in sales, but I worked for the best, and I worked for the VP of sales, and I learned everything about forecasting. I was an ODA for 10 years working under the Verizon account. And then I got my first job as a service sales rep covering a service provider under Comcast. And I loved the role. It was a little difficult because it was one account, dealing with all executives. But I think my strong suit has always been relationships. I think the most success, you don't have to be the smartest person, but I remember thinking in my interview, if I was interviewing Joe Schmo that was from Harvard, really articulate, really smart, or Helen Lamproulos from UMass Amherst, who's got passion and drive, hands down, Helen's a girl. And I just think it's all about passion and drive, and that's where I stand. Yes.
I see Kristen from Zscaler. So you know what? To your point, Amanda, it's about it's about who to kind of get you in, right? And then it's really about you working really hard, right, to make your way. I think as I was transitioning, right, from an inside sales rep to a CEO, I remember someone said to me once, we made you who you are. And I always take that back and I say, no, right? Your job and your employer as your forum, right? They give you that forum and that ability to become what you want to be. It's what you take of that. It's you that's making that, right? No one makes you who you are. You have to make yourself, right? So the passion that we have in technology for the jobs that we have got us where we are, right? All of us, we made it. And to Kristen's point, it was for me for 20, 25 years of always giving back and always giving of myself. It's that when I decided to jump and do this, all the vendors and all the people and the business partners that really kind of gave up themselves and said, hey, it's my turn now to be there for you like you were there for me. And that's really kind of what helped us get where we are. Mm-hmm. Is that pay it forward moment, right? Which we'll talk about again later. What am I thinking? So I think about obstacles I had to overcome, right? I think about the obstacles, especially as a female in tech, right? For me, it's always been a boys club. It has been, right? It's been very hard to, especially in our space, right? Trying to make something of yourself or try to stand out from the rest of the crowd, right? And try to fit in. Sometimes I had great crowds as a VAR and friends that I still have today that always made me feel a part of them and as important to them as they are for themselves. And there's other moments where you weren't as important, right? You were just that girl, right? You were just an inside sales rep, right? They weren't successful because of you. They almost made you feel like they were successful in spite of you, right? And that's kind of how I've had to those are my biggest obstacles, at least for me, is trying to overcome that, right? And the feeling of not feeling as important as everybody else did, right? And that's a female thing, right? They talked about that at Women of the Channel the other day about how we're harder on ourselves and most people are harder on them. And I think from a female's perspective, that's been the hardest part for me, and I still feel that way. I have a title, but I'm still me at the end of the day, and I'm too old to change that. Kelli, what do you think about you?
Yeah, along those same lines, and I feel like having a family, that's been kind of a challenge and an obstacle. I have a daughter 12 years old and a son 10, but even when they were younger and growing up, just the balance and kind of figuring out, I'm thinking when I was single and could just go and travel all the time and be away from my kids and have a care in the world. I mean, and I would just work, as much as possible. And I feel like I put in my time then and made a lot of relationships, but it's kind of, for me, kind of figuring out that balance of, being there for your job, but then also, prioritizing your family clearly, has been kind of a struggle. And I feel like sometimes the guilt trip, like as a mom and, you're going to go away. And, but I feel like I had to step up. I wanted to be successful in my career and model that for my kids and things like that, so they get it. I think it's kind of just finding that balance, Maryann, is one thing that I've had to, struggle with a little bit, some of the obstacles.
Amanda, how about you?
So I think back to 2020, and probably everybody's 2020 was miserable to a certain extent, right? A lot of transition for folks that are listening and all of us on the panel. In 2020, so I don't have kids, Kelli. I'm married. I'm based in Charlotte, North Carolina, but I had the opportunity to take a step forward in my career here at CrowdStrike and go lead our European region. And this is obviously before COVID was a thing. So I actually moved. My husband works for a local partner here in Charlotte, and so he stayed, and we don't have kids. So he was super supportive. He's the best partner that I have, and I love him so much. But he allowed me to go to London, so I moved to London in February of 2020, not knowing that it was going to be COVID, and had the pleasure of leading our European organization for the next almost 2.5 years through what was a global pandemic, right? And so from a challenges standpoint, yes, moving to London without my husband and not seeing him, I think I saw him maybe 4 times in that year, which was really difficult. But then 2, taking an organization and scaling them, not only with hiring folks, but taking Europeans who are very much an in-person relationship driven, just like a lot of folks in New York are, to virtual hybrid or remote work, right? So there was a lot of challenges that I went through personally of just having to keep my folks motivated. Also, too, that balance of the personal side of making really a lot of sacrifices of being and building out and putting that career first. So 2020 was an interesting year across the board. If we had more time, I could dig into it, but I learned a lot through those 2 years. It was a great learning experience. And ultimately that sacrifice allowed me to come back in February of this year to come back and lead our Americas organization. So it was helpful in my own career progression, which was great. But yeah, it was pretty challenging.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's insane.
Well, you think about it, right? It's February 2020, right? Who expected, okay, it's just something going on in the world. Who expected what we went through in the last couple of years?
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. People always ask too. They're like, so you travel a lot? And I said, remember 2020? I couldn't even get into the country. So no.
You're trapped.
Yeah.
Exactly right. I remember I started this role that I'm in now. I took this job when I came to VMware. I was across kind of our federal SLED and healthcare business, but then I went into the SLED specific role, and I had a lot more experience with some of the federal VAR partners that we work with. So when I moved into this, I was like, oh, well, I live down in Maryland. I was like, I'll travel up to New York and meet all the partners, and literally like COVID hit, and it was like, oh, I've got to meet everyone. To your point, such a figuring out the obstacle of Zoom and how to, and build relationships that way, which we talked about, is so important. For me, I was like a brand new face to a lot of these partners that then I had to learn to work with. So it's crazy times.
Everyone always said, well, you'll be fine. Just go to all your customers and just sell them remote stuff. I'm like, I've been in business like 5 minutes. What customers? Like, who am I going to call? Like, what do? I have employees, staff, and what am I supposed to do with that? So we had a lot of people who jumped up and helped us. And, again, it's all about who you know and who you help. Helen, how about you?
So it's just so funny that Amanda said that, because I'm first generation. My family's from Greece, and my father goes to Greece every week because he drives us crazy. He still works, paints houses, like one of those crazy Greeks. And we were the last flight that came back to the United States in Boston, and the airport shut down. We were the last flight to enter the U.S. And I don't think we realized how crazy it was. But what I was going to say is, like, when I'm thinking about like hurdles, and I think 2 things that I think about. The first thing is that I always had this perception that because I work hard and I do a great job, that I would always be taken care of. And my good friend Patrick Moraz at Cisco taught me a very valuable lesson. When I was like, I can't believe it. I just said something, wanted to say something. I'm not going to get a raise. It's like, stop it. You are responsible for you. Don't expect anyone to take care of you. And that was the biggest lesson I learned. You need to advocate for yourself, whether your wins or losses or whatever. And that was a really important lesson that I learned, because I always expected people to take care of me. I did a great job. And that's just not how it works. You are responsible, to advocate for yourself. I'm a great cheerleader for other people. When it comes to myself, I've always struggled with that. And the second thing is that in all candor, I've always felt like maybe because the leaders that I've had have always been men, but I've always like gotten the support from men in my organizations more than women.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if it's across the board. The issue that I always had though is that because I've always been single, never had kids, and people always assumed something was going on with me and my bosses because I was a single one, and I just like ignored the noise or whatever. But it's crazy though, but it's real, and I have friends like in the same industry, and when they tell me that that they work for women and that they're not very supportive, and it's like we always say about women supporting women, but I've always had men in my back corner because they're the ones that have supported me when it came to promotions. It wasn't women, unfortunately. I wish I could say that, but it really hasn't been. It's been men in my life and my network that have been there for me, to promote me and support me.
And I think I remember when I kind of made that leap, right? If you look at that, right, there were a lot of men, right, who supported me and who really who really had my back. There was a handful of women who didn't, right, who kind of felt like, well, this is my chance to kind of, be something more and kind of show that I've got the company's back and not hers. So you do see that a lot more often than you would think you would. You would think that it would always be supportive, but sometimes it's the men that support you a lot more.
Yes, like almost like women are like, why you and not me? Instead of women like, oh my God, it's great, you earned it or whatever. But I've felt that and I've seen that happen. I think it's sad because I'm always about like, don't hire a woman just because she's a woman. That's an insult to me. You hire the best. I don't care what they have. You hire the best. So I remember someone texted me one time and said, "What, you have to congratulate me that I hired a woman?" I'm like, "No, is she the best?" They're like, "Yeah." Then yes, congratulations. Don't tell me just because you hired a woman. That's stupid. Like that thinking is out the door or whatever. Because I want to be hired because I'm the best one for the job, not just because I'm a woman. Mm-hmm. That bothers me, in terms of leadership. People get promoted because they're women, because they have to hire a woman. That's so wrong at every level. How would a man feel that, I have to hire him because he's a female? Really? Come on. Let's get back to this is 2022 or whatever. And I just think mentality to think it.
Well, I think that's important too, right? We've all had to coach other women, right? Coach other people, right? I've had to coach many young girls in my career, right? I always tell them, stand up, right, for who you are, what you bring to the table, right? Mm-hmm. Don't stand on looks, don't stand on anything else, right? Stand up for your talent, your skill sets. I mean, there's got to be women that, between Kelli and Amanda, you guys have had to nurture and kind of teach along the way too.
Absolutely. Kelli, go ahead.
You go ahead, Amanda.
So the biggest thing is that I've seen, I think there's differences, and it's probably across the org, but when I was in marketing early on, I didn't see it as often with like the female aspect, and then coming to sales, because we feel like there's limited seats at the table, we end up fighting each other for the 1 or 2 seats that are at the table, which is an issue. But on the second side of the men supporting, I think the biggest thing and the advice that I always give to folks who are early in career, or even just people in my organization, is that beyond having a mentor, you truly need a champion and somebody who's responsible and sitting in the room that have the ability to understand either roles coming up or speak for your own brand and say, hey, you know what, Amanda would be great at that role ahead of time, right? Like usually roles are created when we're thinking about next year's planning with leaders. Having a champion that sits at that table when you're not in the room is really important. And everybody, all the females at our organization can have a champion. They just don't technically think through that. They think having a mentor is a great option, but you really need those advocates, which it sounds like, Helen, you've had along the way. I think is a really, really important aspect to your own career progression and success.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think I've had a lot of men supporters too, and I've had great women mentors that I've looked up to and kind of model myself after. But sometimes it does a little bit of confidence, like, Kelli, you'd be great at that role. Like you can do that. Like having that champion that would say, this is meant for you. Cause I feel like that's one area I'm like, oh no, that's too much. No, you're doing half of that already today. Whether it's a men or women, I think having those champions. Yeah, for sure.
That's right.
So Kelli, there's a lot of questions on the panel.
Yeah.
About so You're the only one on the panel with children.
I know, that's crazy. I am.
So you're gonna have to answer the
All
question about women and being a mom first, right?
Yes, and I know, and that's and it truly is. It is such a struggle because I'm of the mindset, and it's so great at VMware. Like my boss now is like family first, and I mean I think I've kind of experienced that anywhere, like whatever you're going through in life or what, and VMware has like a great maternity and even paternity leave. I'm like, this is great. I might have had more kids when I first joined to get like 18 weeks or whatever they give now. But it truly is that like balance. And I wouldn't say that's like held me back maybe from even higher leadership roles, but sometimes I'm like, just at my level where I am and kind of an individual contributor, just responsible for myself and like my team and doing a good job, lets me kind of have that great balance, I feel like, and spend time with my family and not feeling like Amanda, your level, like I have a whole team to oversee and they might need me at any given time. So it's just it is a hard thing, and every person's different. And I feel like I'm at a great place in my career where I'm just happy with where I'm at. I mean, you always want to grow and learn, and I love the forum we're in today and doing more and inspiring people. But I do have my family that I'm like, okay, they do come first. So I'm going to make sure like they're always a priority, over work. And the COVID thing with travel, Maryann, just kind of along those lines it kind of has been a nice, I mean, I was on the road a lot more, and that little bit of guilt, like you're going away again. So it's been a nice balance. It's nice to have a little bit of flexibility, still get out now and see people more, but be able to do a lot more remote where you're not on the road every single week. So
just on that real quick, if I can add, Maryann, is that from like a setting your own boundaries and work-life balance. One work-life balance really doesn't exist because you're responsible for your own schedules, and especially COVID times when we're all working remote and we're not in an office from 9 to 5. It can bleed into your life, right? If you don't have kids, if you have kids, if your schedule can overwhelm essentially. And so making sure, and this is what I tell my own employees, is that making sure that you set boundaries for carving out time, making sure that you log off at a reasonable hour and that you don't work super late. Like ultimately, just like Helen, you're your own advocate. You have to set boundaries for that. And I think it's okay to do that with your own internal teams and your partners and your customers.
So smart.
I think it was easier for me when I was a contributor and not a CEO with a staff.
Totally.
You have to be available, right, Maryann? Kind of. If something blows up, they need you and your guidance. But Amanda, you're spot on. I mean, you got to have your own well-being and be your own champion of what your boundaries are.
That's right. I mean, Helen and I, we have to go make dinner too, right? So I got to log off and then I'll come back. But, I'm just setting those boundaries. That's all.
Yes.
Listen, I made potatoes at 5:30 this morning, so I can have them ready for tonight.
Crock pot.
The crock pot has been my best friend for a super long time because, when I was on the road a lot all the time, my husband always be like, do I take the plastic off the chicken before I put it in the oven? It's like, yes, you take the plastic off. So I've learned the crock pot a whole lot in my day. And so I think one of the things that I always think about is for me, like, what have been like my greatest challenges or my greatest reward, right? If I look at reward, it's been my career. I've made a lot of friends, obviously Raj Patel, we're friends with a lot of people, right? It's making friends for life, right? Because you spend so much time in that workspace. You need friends, right? And I think that, Tom Riley, I made potatoes at 5 o'clock this morning. It's making those friends forever, right? People that you can turn to, right? So for me, like one of my biggest rewards has been the friends that I've made over the 25 years in the industry. I told you, Helen, the other night, I ran into Tom Orrick and all the guys over at the Cisco Pat Finn thing. And all those people I've known for 20 years. And you're still, loved by them. You still love them. You're still friends. I think for me, that's been my biggest reward. Listen, building a business is a reward too. To see it go from zero, like when I say zero, I mean zero, to what it is today is a very big deal. But I think for me, it's my reputation has been my biggest reward for me.
You know what I find so different though too is like my best friends are from Cisco from when I started in day one. But the world has changed, and so like we did a sleep out. Cisco supports the company house, and we did a sleep out, and I was like one of the speakers, and I just said, especially for all these people that were hired during COVID, like there was something about being in an office. Like back in the days of Lexington, you had to be in the office on Monday, or there was no IP address or whatever. That's where you built your networks. You know what I mean? So what happens in today's world where everyone is remote? You know what I mean? Like I just find it interesting. Are you going to build the type of friendships that you have like back in the day that we started in this industry? Because my network is the strongest. They're just as supportive as my own family and my friends that I've grown up with. And I was just curious because I guess none of us have been. I don't know, Amanda, you think like how does that work in today's world? Like how do you build a network when you're working remotely? I'm just curious.
The one point that I've seen is that it's because, especially over the last 2 years, imagine joining an organization in 2020 and you still haven't met your coworkers. It's very difficult to care about the other person on the screen if you haven't interacted with them outside of the normal work talk, right? So we usually, when we're in an office, we have those opportunities at lunch, or if you're getting water, or if you're walking past, to have those personal interactions, and taking that off. And when you're hopping from WebEx to WebEx or Zoom to Zoom and you don't have the personal interactions, what that drives is a lack of loyalty, one, to your organization, but also to build the empathy and the caring and the relationships with your coworkers. Because 100% you can join an organization if you're not connected to that organization, or if you're not connected and building relationships with your peers within an organization. If another job offer comes along, you'll probably get pulled faster than you would if you were actually based in office. Now, I am not for all office work. I'll say that. I will not be going into an office full time. I love the hybrid work of being able to be remote first. I'll say that. But you have to try a lot harder, right? Of trying to build those connections and not having 15 Zoom meetings a day, where you can build in opportunities for more of that organic talk and really the empathy of your peers. I think as a leader, building in budget for offsites or QBRs or fun activities with your teams to drive that is really important, and something that, given our economy, it's like making sure that we include that in the budget as leaders is really important, so that folks actually stay with your organization. But you're spot on. If not being in an office, it's hard. You're not going to have the same relationships, and then people basically will get to know you for the brand and what you deliver for your work, right? Not necessarily who you are as an individual. So it's just a different experience across the board.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that a lot of the relationships that I built have been in an office, right? When we started, we were in an office 5 days a week up until 2020. You went to lunch, you just sat down, you had rapport, you had that face-to-face connection. I think remote got a lot difficult. I encourage people even today. Listen, I'm okay with hybrid. I think hybrid's fine. Even as an owner, hybrid's fine. I think that people need to come out of their house when they're remote too much, because I think that you forget you work for a company. You forget there's people out there. You feel isolated, right? And you don't feel like you're part of a team. I think I saw Ed DeVries say, there's no I in team. But what happens is, if you're always remote and you're never with anybody, you start to feel like you're alone. And it's very hard to pull people in.
Mm-hmm. The one of my that lives alone, right? I live alone, and during COVID, I can tell I'm an extrovert. I get my energy from people, and I'm just telling you, 15 calls a day on WebEx just doesn't cut it for me. So when we first finally got together, it was it was the best feeling. Like I really, and I don't, even if you're an introvert, it's not healthy to just be on a WebEx all day long. And this is a perfect example. I picked up a new team in New York City, and I hadn't met them face to face till 2 weeks ago. And let me just tell you something, what the difference is between I really got to know them, you know what I mean? And even though we were on WebEx every day, there's nothing about being in person with someone and meeting them is really so much more. I don't know. It's a different experience. I have a different feeling towards people now that I've met face to face. I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, you're so much taller than what I thought you were going to be.
Yeah.
Seriously, it makes a difference. It really, at least for me, it does. For me, it does.
Totally. Yeah. I was with a team last week, and it was like I hadn't seen a lot of those people in the 2 years I had this role, and it was so great. And you can't replace the conversations and the relationship building through Zoom. I mean, you're spot on.
WebEx. WebEx.
Yeah. WebEx, sorry, WebEx.
Yeah. Agreed.
Amanda, do you want to take Allison's questions? And you did some remote, and you had to build teams remotely?
Yeah, so just the last comment there too, which kind of ties into it. You can build meaningful relationships via Zoom or WebEx or Teams with video calls. Whether folks are comfortable turning on their camera is a different story, and that's the line that I don't push as often. It's interesting, the Europeans, when I led that organization, they were very keen to have videos on throughout the entire 2 years. When I came back to the States, not a single American wanted to turn their camera on. So it's just me with my camera on to like 90 different blank screens, which is fun. So you can't force that. But from like building successful communities remotely, I guess it comes down to one, if you own budget or if you're responsible for a team of folks, is being mindful of how you're carving out time, whether on the beginning of calls or throughout sessions, doing breakout sessions where possible, doing larger calls. And I'm speaking of specific, like internal, obviously team sort of get-togethers, QBR sessions. The other thing too is that I like to do a day or a couple days every single quarter where we're doing development, volunteering, some sort of community aspect once a quarter. And then we'll do like a Christmas gatherings or a holiday gathering when it comes to getting together as a team, again, albeit virtually. It was interesting where we've had folks come on and performer. And so you're driving that more community aspect. There's a couple different ways that you could do that, and through just those meaningful intentions. And yes, is it forced fun? Yes, I like to call it forced fun. So I'm going to force you to get on this call. We're going to have fun together for just an hour, and you're going to get to know your coworkers in a more meaningful way. But that's more organic than just speaking about business and having your routine internal calls or partner calls or customer calls every single day. So you have to be very intentional about your agenda and what you're scheduling for your team. Yeah.
I think you can. Listen, I had to sell a brand new business on, Zoom and WebEx the entire time, or whatever platform everybody used. So it was really hard to sell to people, because I think the one thing you do miss is the authenticity of somebody. I think you lose that over, a Zoom or a Teams meeting, right? I think you lose that because you can't feel the authenticity in person. You can't feel that person. So I think that's the one piece that does miss. Yes, we had to sell and live through video calls, and we did. We sold through video, and we did what we had to do. Everyone got dressed from the waist up, and you all look fine on camera. But I still think that even when we were in the channel last week with the Cisco team, running into the Fortinet team, the Arista team, like there was everybody in one spot. It was so nice to see everybody out and just not being afraid of being able to be with each other, because those are relationships that you've had since God even knows when. A lot of these people, it was kind of nice for people to physically be with each other, and it made such a big difference in people's day, because they're like, oh my God, I haven't seen you in 2.5 years. And I think that contact, the physical contact with people, makes a really big difference, right? Especially as women, we're very much, we love to collaborate, we love to talk, we love to kind of meet people in person. So especially for us, right, we like that interaction. I think that's super important for most of us. It's been great for my career, which kind of brings me to, I know women ask me all the time, like, how do you connect with other women? What do you find the best way to work with other people? And for me, it's joining things like Women of the Channel. It's doing things like this. It's bringing people into your world as well as trying to find people through the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce and different events. Do you guys have any suggestions of how you've met people and where other women can find other women to kind of work alongside or learn from? It's a hard question because there aren't that many.
I know, and I'm thinking, I know there's some things in VMware, like we have a Women in VMware pod, and men participate too, but they'll bring speakers on and they'll do educational sessions, and we're taking it to our SLED team and pulling women just all within our state local education team together, and it was awesome. Granted, that's internal at VMware, and I'm appreciative of the forum that's there for that, Maryann, because you're right. Besides Women in the Channel, I don't know how much other opportunities are out there to connect with each other. That's why what you're doing is great, bringing us all on here. Amanda, you might, I don't.
Yeah, so I think that, well, this is hard because if you're an introvert, and I know probably none of us on this call that are presenting are, but if you're an introvert, it's hard because you have to put yourself out there when it comes to connecting with other women, and you have to go to networking events, and you'll have to ask those female leaders if they would like to either participate in a mentorship or just have a quarterly cadence, right? So you're starting to reach out to other females within your organization. I know that's a lot, right? So if there's the ERG groups or the internal groups that are women of CrowdStrike or women of VMware or women of Cisco, I know that there's some great groups internally that you can start just from a connection standpoint, the local networking events. My 2023 resolution is actually to get closer and tighter aligned to the Charlotte Women's in Technology group, just because I have built a network outside of Charlotte and I live here. I've lived here for almost 9 years and I know maybe 10 people locally. So we're going to expand that. I'm going to be intentional about meeting other females and giving back to the local community for next year. And it's honestly just looking at ways to mentor, ways to volunteer, ways to participate on panels like this, Maryann. And I think, one, thank you for providing the forum, because this is a great avenue that's on LinkedIn. And folks, if you're able to reach out, like, happy to have a conversation to connect. And if there's any questions, like, I would always love to be a resource for other women within our industry.
So I told you 45 minutes would go fast. We're down to 4. I'm always afraid we'll never fill the airtime. Then it's like, oh God, I only have 3 minutes left. So I want to talk about the Mahima Foundation as well. For 2023, for me, what I'm looking for is always company growth and job stability for my staff. But for me, it's giving back and finding different ways to make it more about not just the business and me, but about others. Right, a lot of us know Raj Patel from VMware, previously from Cisco. He has the Mahima Foundation, which helps kids and they go to school. And yes, I know there's a lot of kids in the U.S. that need help too. It's about helping our community in tech, and that's one thing that we've been doing a little bit of in 2022. In 2023, we'd like to do a lot more giving back. So I want to thank him for his friendship over the last long time, as well as what he and his family do to give back to children and giving them an education which they wouldn't get without people like us. So that's one of the things that I would like to do, and that's the foundation that one of the ones that we've chosen to give back to. So for 2023, 2 minutes to spare. Kelli, we'll start with you. 2023 resolutions. We're here.
I know. I think for me, it is probably more participation in things like this. Because I find you get so busy with your day to day with work, and even with my Women at VMware pod, I do want to do more of this type of things and networking, because it is all about relationships, and I just feel like that's so important for people out there. So that's a resolution of mine, is to find time, because you always get so busy you don't think you have enough time, but it's like, this is important and it makes a difference.
Amanda,
give back to Charlotte locally. Females in Charlotte. That's my resolution. There you go.
Helen,
continue giving back. I'm a big supporter of giving back. And earlier when you had asked about, it's such a great networking opportunity too. I attended Raj's Mahima Foundation, and I met so many people. And then we did an in-person sleep out in Blacksburg, Mass. And I met like 35 new people that started at Cisco during COVID. Giving back is, everybody wants to give, they just don't know necessarily what to give back to, because there's so many scams out there. And so giving back 2023 to give back more.
I want to take the last minute to say thank you very much to my awesome panel for all their great advice. And anybody that's watching can reach out to any one of us. We'd be more than happy to give back to you and give you guys some words of encouragement and advice. I'll close with some words from my friend Chris Wolf on the last one. When I called her and said I quit my job to start a reseller, and she was like, "What? Are you crazy? You woman against all the men?" And she said, "You have to find a way to make yourself different, a way to separate yourself from the rest of the pack." And that's my closing words for people: is find ways to separate yourself from everybody else and make your mark on what we do. So thank you everyone for attending. That was a quick 45 minutes. Panel, you guys can stay on. Everyone else, thank you very much. Tune in next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Happy holidays.
Grady, where'd you go?